The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Matsuo Basho, Part 2. Walked a few miles from Tokyu's home to the town of Hiwata in the foothills of Mount Asaka. Marshlands glistened outside of town. Almost midsummer, iris-picking time. I asked about blossoming katsumi, but no one knew where they grew. I searched all day, muttering, "Katsumi, Katsumi," until the sun set over the mountains. We followed a road to the right at Nihon Matsu and stopped to see Kurozuka Cave, and stayed the night in Fukushima. At dawn we left for Shinobu, famous for dyed cloth, called Shinobuzuri, named after the rock we found half buried in the mountain. Village children joined us and explained, in the old days the rock was on top of the mountain, but visitors trampled farmers' crops and picked grain, so the old men rolled it down. Their story made perfect sense. Girls' busy hands plant rice, almost like the ancient ones made dye. Crossed on the ferry at Tsukinawa to the post town of Sei-no-Yue to see the ruins that were Sato Shoji's house, beyond town to the left, near the mountains. We were told to look at Saba Moor in Izuka, and we eventually came to Maru Hill, where the castle ruins lay. Seeing the main gate sundered, the ancient temple nearby, seeing all the family graves, my eyes glazed with tears, especially at the tomb of two young widows who had dressed in the armor of fallen sons, and then laid down their lives. Like Tuyu at Weeping Grave Mound, I dried my eyes with a sleeve. Inside the temple, enjoying tea, seeing Yoshitsune's great long sword and the priest Benkei's little Buddhist wicker chest, both enshrined. Sword, chest, and wind carp, all proudly displayed on Boys' Festival Day. It was the first of Satsuki, rice planting month. Staying the night in Izuka, we bathed in a mineral hot springs before returning to thin straw sleeping mats on bare ground, a true country inn. Without a lamp, we made our beds by firelight, in flickering shadows, and closed our tired eyes. Suddenly a thunderous downpour and leaky roof aroused us, fleas and mosquitoes everywhere. Old infirmaries tortured me throughout the long, sleepless night. At first light, long before dawn, we packed our things and left, distracted, tired, but moving on. Sick and worried, we hired horses to ride to the town of Kori. I worried about my plans. With every pilgrimage, one encounters the temporality of life. To die along the road is destiny, or so I told myself. I stiffened my will and, once resolute, crossed Okido Barrier in Date Province. Through narrow Abuzuri Pass and on, passing Shiroishi Castle, we entered Kasashima Province. We asked for directions to the grave mound of Lord Senekata, Sei Shanegan's exiled poet-lover, and were told to turn right on the hills near the villages of Minoa and Kasashima when we came to the Shrine of Doshojin. It lies nearly hidden in sage-grass Saijo remembered in a poem. May rains turned the trail to mud. We stopped, sick and worn out, and looked at the two aptly named villages in the distance, Straw Raincoat Village and Umbrella Island. Where's Kasashima? Lost in the rainy season on a muddy road. The night was spent in Iwanuma. Deeply touched by the famous pine at Takakuma, twin trunks just as long ago. The poet-priest Noin came to mind. Before he came, Lord Fujiwara no Takayoshi cut down the tree for lumber, building a bridge across the Narurigawa. Noin wrote, "No sign here now of that famous pine." Reported to have been cut down and replaced several times, it stood like a relic of 1,000 years, impossibly perfect. The poet Kinohaku had given me a poem at my departure. Remember to show my master the famous Takakuma pine, O northern blossoming cherries. To which I now reply, ever since cherry blossom time, I long to visit the famous split pine. 3 long months have passed. We crossed over the Natorigawa on the 7th day, fifth moon, and entered Sendai on the day we tie blue iris to the eaves and pray for health. We found an inn and decided to spend several days. I'd heard of a painter here, Kaimon, who was a kindred spirit and had visited all the nearby places the poets had made famous. Before him, these places were all but forgotten. He agreed to be our guide. The fields of Miyagi were carpeted with bush clover that would bloom in autumn. In Tamada, Yokono, and at Azalea Hill, there were Andromeda flowers in bloom. Passing through pine woods sunlight couldn't penetrate, we came to Konoshita, the underwoods where the Konishu poet begged an umbrella for his lord in falling dew. We visited Yakushido Shrine and the Shrine of Tenjin until the sun went down. Later, the painter gave us drawings of Matsushima and Shiogama, and 2 pairs of new straw sandals with Irish blue straps, Hanamuke, farewell gifts. He was a truly kindred spirit. To have blue irises blooming on one's feet, walking sandal straps. Checking Kaimon's drawings as we walked, we followed the Oku no Hosomichi along the mountainside where sedge grass grew tall in bunches. The Tofu area is famous for its sedge mats sent in tribute to the governor each year. At Taga Castle, we found the most ancient monument, Subo no Ishibumi, in Ichikawa village. It's about 6 feet high and 3 feet wide. We struggled to read the inscription under heavy moss. This castle was built by Shogun Ono no Azumabito in 724. In 762, His Majesty's commanding general, Imai no Asakari, supervised repairs. Dated from the time of Emperor Shomu, Subo no Ishibumi inspired many a poet. Floods and landslides buried trails and markers. Trees have grown and died, making this monument very difficult to find. The past remains hidden in clouds of memory. Still, it returned us to memories from 1,000 years before. Such a moment is the reason for a pilgrimage. Infirmities forgotten, the ancients remembered. Joyous cheers trembled in my eyes. We stopped along the Tama River at Noda and at the huge stone in the lake, Okino-ishi, both made famous in poems. On Mount Sueno-matsu, we found a temple called Masozan. There were graves everywhere among the pines, underscoring Po Chu-i's famous lines quoted in the Tale of Genji. Wing and wing, branch and branch, and I thought, yes, what we all must come to, my sadness heavy. At Shiogama Beach, a bell sounded evening. The summer rain sky cleared to reveal a pale moon high over Magaki Island. I remembered the fishing boats pulling together in a Kokinshu poem and understood it clearly for the first time. Along the Michinoku, every place is wonderful, but in Shiogama, fishing boats pulling together are most amazing of all. That night we were entertained by a blind singer playing a lute to boisterous backcountry ballads one hears only deep inside the country, not like the tale of Haiku songs or the dance songs, a real earful, but pleased to hear the tradition continued. Rose at dawn to pay respects at Myojin Shrine in Shiogama. The former governor rebuilt it with huge, stately pillars, bright painted rafters, and a long stone walkway rising steeply under a morning sun that danced and flashed along the red lacquered fence. I thought, as long as the road is, even if it ends in dust, the gods come with us, keeping a watchful eye. This is our culture's greatest gift. Kneeling at the shrine, I noticed a fine old lantern with this inscribed on its iron gate. In the 3rd year of the Bunji era, dedicated by Izumi Saburo. Suddenly, 5 long centuries passed before my eyes. He was a trusted, loyal man, martyred by his brother. Today, there's not a man alive who doesn't revere his name. As he himself would say, a man must follow the Confucian model. Renown will inevitably result. Sun high overhead before we left the shrine, we hired a boat to cross to Matsushima, a mile or more away. We disembarked on Ojima Beach. As many others often observed, the views of Matsushima take one's breath away. It may be, along with Lake Tungting and West Lake in China, the most beautiful place in the world. Islands in a 3-mile bay, the sea to the southeast entering like flood tide on the Chiangtang River in Chaikian. Small islands, tall islands pointing at the sky, islands on top of islands, islands like mothers with baby islands on their backs. Islands cradling islands in the bay, all covered with deep green pines shaped by salty winds, trained into sea wind bonsai. Here one is almost overcome by the sense of intense feminine beauty in a shining world. It must have been the mountain god Oyazumi who made this place, and whose words or brush could adequately describe a world so divinely inspired. Ojima Beach is not, as its name implies, an island, but a strand projected into the bay. Here one finds the ruins of Ungo Zenji's hermitage, and the rock where he sat zazen, and still a few tiny thatched huts under pines where religious hermits live in tranquility. Smoke of burning leaves and pine cones drew me on, touching something deep inside. Then the moon rose, shining on the sea. Day turned suddenly to night. We stayed at an inn on the shore, our second-story windows opening on the bay. Drifting with winds and clouds, it was almost like a dream. Sora wrote, "In Matsushima, you'll need the wings of a crane, little cuckoo." I was speechless and tried to sleep, but rose to dig from my pack a Chinese-style poem my friend Soto had written for me, something about Pine Islands, and also a waka by Hara Anteki, and haiku by Sampu in Jokushi. On the 11th day, 5th moon, we visited Sugyeon Temple and were met by the 32nd generation descendant of the founder, established by Makabe no Haishiro at the time he returned from religious studies in Tang, China. The temple was enlarged under Ungo Zenji into 7 main structures with new blue tile roofs, walls of gold, a jeweled Buddha land. But my mind wandered, wondering if the priest Kemputsu, they temple might be found. Early morning of the 12th day, 5th moon. We started out for Hirozumi, intending to go by way of the famous Aneha Pine and the Odai Bridge. The trail was narrow and little traveled, only the occasional woodcutter or hunter. We took a wrong road and ended up in the port town of Ishunumake and a broad bay with Mount Kinka in the distance. Yakamochi has a poem for the emperor in the Manyoshu, saying Kinka is where gold blossoms. It rises across water cluttered with cargo boats and fishing boats, shoreline packed with houses, smoke rising from their stoves. Our unplanned visit prompted an immediate search for lodging. No one made an offer, spent the night in a cold shack, and left again at daybreak, following unknown paths. We passed near the Sode Ferry, Obuchi Meadow, and the Mono Moor, all made famous in poems. After crossing a long, miserable marsh, we stayed at Toima, pushed on to Hirozumi in the morning, an arduous trek of over 40 difficult miles in 2 days. Here 3 generations of the Fujiwari clan passed as though in a dream. The great outer gates lay in ruins. Where Hidera's manor stood, rice fields grew. Only Mount Kinkei remained. I climbed the hill where Yotsushuni died. I saw the Kitami, a broad stream flowing down through the Nambu Plain, the Koromo River circling Izumi Castle below the hill before joining the Kitakami. The ancient ruins of Yashuri, from the end of the Golden Era, lie out beyond the Koromo barrier, where they stood, guard against the Ainu people. The faithful elite remained bound to the castle, for all their valor, reduced to ordinary grass. Tufu wrote, "The whole country devastated, only mountains and rivers remain." In springtime at the ruined castle, the grass is always green. We sat a while, our hats for a seat, seeing it all through tears. Summer grasses, all that remained of great soldiers' imperial dreams. Sora wrote, Kanefusa's own white hair seen in blossoming briar. 2 temple halls I longed to see were finally opened at Chusan Temple. In the Sutra Library, Kyodo, statues of the 3 generals of Hirozumi, and in the Hall of Light, Hikarido, their coffins and images of 3 Buddhas. It would have all fallen down, jeweled doors battered by winds, gold pillars cracked by cold, all would have gone to grass, but added outer roof and walls protect it. Through the endless winds and rains of 1,000 years, this great hall remains. 5th month rains hammer and blow but never quite touch, Hikarido. The road through the Nambu Plain visible in the distance. We stayed the night in Iwate, then trudged on past Cape Oguro and Mizu Island, both along the river. Beyond Naguro Hot Springs, we crossed Shitomai Barrier and entered Diowa Province. Almost no one comes this way, and the barrier guards were suspicious, slow, and thorough. Delayed, we climbed the steep mountain in falling dark and took refuge in a guard shack. A heavy storm pounded the shack with wind and rain for 3 miserable days.